Welcome to part 2 of How God Raised a King, the story of David. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, go watch it first to see how David's story began. The story of David in 2 Samuel begins not with victory, but with grief. The crown is within reach, yet David's heart is broken. The battlefield on Mount Gilboa has fallen silent, and the news is carried toward David with footsteps heavy enough to crush the air around them. Saul is dead. Jonathan is dead. The king who hunted him and the friend who loved him, both gone in a single day. And when David hears it, the mighty warrior collapses into a flood of tears. He rips his clothes. He mourns until his voice cracks. His heart fractures in ways a throne can never heal. The man who once hid in caves now weeps openly before God and the people. Jonathan, a brother in spirit, was gone. Saul, the king who tried to kill him, was gone. And yet David refuses revenge. He refuses celebration. Instead, he sings a lament, a song soaked in heartbreak, how the mighty have fallen. And in that moment, before he is king, David reveals why God chose him. He loves deeply, forgives generously, and grieves openly. But grief is not the end of the story. It is the doorway to destiny. At last, after years of running and hiding, David asks God, "Shall I go up to the cities of Judah?" And the Lord answers, "Go up." David goes to Hebron, and there, amidst tears still fresh from his loss, the men of Judah anoint him king. Not of all Israel, not yet, but God is building something steady, something rooted, something eternal. The path to the throne is not peaceful. Saul's remaining family refuses to surrender the kingdom. A rival general, Abner, tries to keep Saul's line alive by installing Ishbosheth as king over Israel. The nation splits in two, Judah under David, Israel under Saul's son, and the land trembles under the weight of civil war. Brothers turn against brothers, camps ignite with tension. But even as battles rage, God's favor rests on David. His house grows stronger, Saul's grows weaker. Purpose pushes forward, even through conflict. Eventually, Abner, once David's enemy, sees the truth. He approaches David, offering to unite all Israel under his rule. David welcomes him with open hands, a sign of peace, a sign of the king he will become. But not everyone in David's camp shares his mercy. Joab, David's fierce commander, murders Abner in secret, driven by revenge. When David hears of it, his heart breaks again. He mourns Abner publicly, distancing himself from the violence, declaring to all Israel that his kingdom will be built on justice, not bloodshed. Slowly, the nation begins to turn its heart toward David. Soon, Ishbosheth is murdered as well, and David responds not with applause, but with judgment. He refuses to gain the throne through treachery. He refuses shortcuts. He refuses the easy path. And finally, with all rivals removed, not by his hand, but by time, David is anointed king over the entire nation of Israel. The throne God promised him years ago is now his. A shepherd boy becomes the king of a nation. A fugitive becomes a ruler. A broken man becomes a legend. And the first act of his reign is a declaration of worship. David chooses a new capital, Jerusalem, a city untouched by tribes, a place of unity and promise. He takes it from the Jebusites and claims it for the Lord. And then, in one of the most powerful moments in Scripture, David brings the Ark of the Covenant into the city. The streets erupt in celebration. Trumpets blast, people shout, and David, Israel's king, dances before the Lord with all his might. He is not concerned with appearances. He is not concerned with dignity. He worships without restraint because he remembers where God brought him from. But not everyone celebrates him. His wife Michal watches him from a window, filled with contempt. The distance between them widens. David's joy becomes her bitterness, and this division will echo painfully through their marriage. Then God gives David a promise so massive it shapes the rest of Scripture. Through the prophet Nathan, God tells him, "Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever." In that moment, David realizes his story is not just about kingship or victory. It is about a lineage that will one day lead to Jesus Christ, the King of Kings. David sits before the presence of God in awe, humbled, overwhelmed, grateful. But even the greatest kings stumble. In a season when kings go to war, David remains home. One night, he steps onto his rooftop, unaware that temptation is waiting in the shadows. He sees a woman bathing, Bathsheba. Desire grips him. He sends for her. And in one tragic decision, David steps outside of God's boundaries. Bathsheba becomes pregnant, and David's fear spirals into manipulation. He calls her husband, Uriah, home from battle, trying to hide the sin. But Uriah is honorable, too honorable. He refuses to go home while his men sleep in the fields. And so, David chooses a darker path. He sends Uriah back to the front lines with orders that guarantee his death. The warrior who served him with loyalty falls because of the king's sin. Bathsheba mourns, unaware of the depth of betrayal. David marries her, hoping the secret will disappear into silence. But God sees what is done in the shadows, and he sends Nathan with a story that pierces David's heart like a sword. David crumbles under conviction. He repents, not with excuses, not with pride, but with a broken spirit. "Create in me a clean heart," he will later write. "Do not cast me from your presence." Forgiveness is given, but consequences still unfold. The child born from his sin becomes sick and dies. David fasts, weeps, pleads, but the child is taken home to God. And in the ashes of grief, David worships. He turns his face back to the one who never abandoned him. From that union, God brings unexpected redemption. Bathsheba later gives birth to Solomon, the future king, the heir of the divine promise. But David's life continues to unravel with pain. His family fractures. His sons rise against one another. One son, Absalom, handsome, charismatic, beloved, loses himself to bitterness and ambition. He rebels against his father, stealing the hearts of the people and driving David out of Jerusalem. The king becomes a fugitive once more, barefoot and weeping as he climbs the Mount of Olives. History repeats itself, but David is older now, weary from loss. Absalom's rebellion ends tragically. In a battle beneath the tangled branches of the forest, his hair catches in a tree. Joab ends his life with 3 spears. When David receives the news, he breaks. The cry that escapes him shakes the walls. "Oh, my son Absalom! My son Absalom! If only I had died instead of you." The pain of a father eclipses the triumph of a king. Victory means nothing when your son is gone. David returns to Jerusalem, but his heart carries wounds deeper than swords. Through turmoil, betrayal, sickness, revolt, and grief, David continues to lean on God. His final years in 2 Samuel are marked by reflection, restoration, and worship. God delivers him from enemies, strengthens his kingdom, and reminds him again and again that his life is part of a story far greater than himself. David sings songs of deliverance. He recalls the faithfulness of God, and as the book closes, the shepherd king stands as a man touched deeply by both glory and sorrow. David's story in 2 Samuel is not a tale of perfection. It is a tale of humanity, flawed, fragile, redeemed. It is the story of a king who loved God fiercely, failed God painfully, and returned to God wholeheartedly. A story that shows us the heights of destiny and the depths of brokenness. A story that reveals how mercy triumphs over judgment, how grace outlives failure, and how God builds His greatest works through imperfect vessels. This is the story of David, the king who danced, the king who wept, the king who sinned, the king who repented, the king who trusted God through every storm. His throne would one day give rise to the Messiah. And through his story, we learn that God can take our shattered pieces and build a kingdom that lasts forever. That was part 2 of the story of David. But the story isn't over yet. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the final part.